Welcome to Marple Whispers, where the faintest murmur conceals a deadly truth. I'm Sean, your guide through a labyrinth of deceit and danger. Every step echoes with secrets, and every shadow hides a motive. Are you ready to unravel the mystery, or become part of it? In the shadowy depths of Elmwood Manor's midnight garden, a terrified maid spies a mysterious figure burying a blood-soaked bundle under the roses. By dawn, a charming guest vanishes without a trace, debts piling up, secrets festering. Enter the unassuming Miss Marple, unravelling a web of jealousy, betrayal and impulse. Was it a staged escape gone fatally wrong? Or a gardener's rage exploding in murder? Stick around as clues bloom like deadly thorns, leading to a shocking confession that exposes the killer's desperate cover-up. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Elmwood Manor. The autumn wind whispered through the ancient oaks lining the drive to Elmwood Manor, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and impending rain. Nestled in the rolling hills of Devon, the manor house loomed like a sentinel from a forgotten era, its stone facade etched with the patina of centuries, ivy tendrils clinging possessively to the walls. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, the indomitable widow who ruled this domain with a velvet-gloved hand, had orchestrated a weekend gathering that promised the subtle undercurrents of intrigue she so relished. Her invitations, penned in elegant script, had drawn an eclectic circle of acquaintances, each harbouring their own quiet secrets beneath polished exteriors. Among the arrivals was her niece, Clara Beaumont, a striking young woman with raven hair and eyes that sparkled like polished emeralds. Clara stepped from the motor car with the grace of a dancer. Her arm linked with that of her fiancé, Captain Arthur Langford. The captain, a tall figure with a moustache that bespoke his military past, exuded an air of bluff confidence, his stories from the Indian frontier already bubbling to the surface as he greeted their hostess. "Evelyn, my dear, this place hasn't changed a whit since the war, still as formidable as a Rajput fortress." Lady Evelyn smiled, her sharp gaze appraising them both. "Arthur, you flatter the old pile, and Clara, how radiant you look. Marriage agrees with you already." Yet behind her words lingered a note of caution. She had heard whispers of Clara's flirtatious ways, echoes of youthful indiscretions that might yet stir trouble. Next came Mr. Reginald Fairfax, the London financier, whose sleek Bentley purred to a halt with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Fairfax was a man of middle years, his face smooth and unlined, but his eyes held the restless glint of one perpetually calculating odds. He bowed over Lady Evelyn's hand with practised charm. "A delight to escape the city's clamour, Lady Hargrove. Your gardens are legendary. I must explore them at leisure." Trailing in his wake was Mrs. Lydia Voss, a formidable society matron swathed in furs. Despite the mild weather, her neck adorned with a cascade of pearls that caught the fading light. "Evelyn, darling, how rustic and charming," she cooed, though her tone suggested a preference for Mayfair salons. Mrs. Voss collected jewels, as others did stamps, and rumour had it her latest acquisition, a sapphire brooch of dubious provenance, had tongues wagging in certain circles. The final guest arrived by the afternoon train, a modest figure in a sensible tweed suit, carrying a worn carpet bag and a basket brimming with knitting wool. Miss Jane Marple, the unassuming spinster from the village of St. Mary Mead, had been coaxed from her cottage by Lady Evelyn's insistent letter. "You must come, Jane," it had read. Your eye for the peculiarities of human nature is unmatched. Besides, the company might amuse you." Miss Marple, with her bird-like curiosity and deceptively mild demeanour, accepted with a quiet nod to the chauffeur who met her at the station. Ushered into the Manor's oak-panelled hall, Miss Marple was enveloped in the warmth of a crackling fire. Lady Evelyn embraced her warmly. "Jane, how good of you to come. I've given you the rose room. Overlooks the gardens splendidly. You'll find them a tangle of beauty and mystery, much like people, don't you think?" "Indeed," Miss Marple replied softly, her eyes already darting about, noting the gleam of silver on the sideboard and the faint dust on a high shelf. Signs of a household efficient but not overly meticulous. She was shown upstairs, where the view from her window revealed manicured lawns sloping to a rose arbour, shadows lengthening as the sun dipped low. "A lovely spot," she murmured to herself, unpacking her needles and yarn. In her experience, gardens often concealed more than they revealed, much like the villagers back home who buried their grievances beneath layers of politeness. As twilight deepened, the party assembled in the drawing-room for aperitifs. The air hummed with conversation, glasses clinking like distant bells. Captain Langford held court by the mantel, regaling Fairfax with tales of tiger hunts. "Blasted beast charged straight at me. Had to take him down with a single shot. Nerves of steel, that's what it takes." Fairfax chuckled, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Impressive, Captain. In the city, our predators are of the financial variety, equally ruthless but less furry." Clara, seated nearby, laughed a touch too brightly, her gaze lingering on Fairfax a moment longer than necessary. Mrs. Voss, ensconced on a settee, interjected with a story of her own, her voice dripping with affected boredom. "Darling, you should see the emeralds I acquired in Paris. Fit for a queen, or so the dealer claimed." Lady Evelyn steered the talk deftly, her own anecdotes laced with wry humour. Miss Marple, perched in a corner armchair, contributed little but observed much. The way Fairfax's fingers drummed restlessly on his knee, Clara's fleeting glances toward the captain, and Mrs. Voss's possessive clutch on her handbag. Dinner followed in the candlelit dining-room, a feast of roast pheasant and fine claret. The young maid, Alice Turner, moved like a shadow among them, her pale face and wide blue eyes absorbing every word and gesture. She was new to the household, fresh from a nearby village, and her hands trembled slightly as she poured the wine, a detail Miss Marple noted with interest, recalling a similar nervousness in a parlour-maid during that unfortunate affair at Gossington Hall. As the evening waned, the clock on the mantel chimed 11, its tones echoing through the hushed corridors. The guests bid good night, retiring to their rooms with yawns and pleasantries. The Manor settled into stillness, broken only by the creak of settling timbers and the distant call of a nightjar. But sleep eluded Alice Turner in her attic chamber. Restless, she rose and peered from the narrow window, the moon casting a silvery glow over the gardens below. There, by the rose arbour, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked in darkness, spade in hand. With deliberate strokes it dug into the soft earth, then lowered a bulky bundle wrapped in coarse cloth. The figure paused, glancing about, before covering its work and melting back into the night. Alice's heart pounded as she drew back, curtains fluttering in the breeze. A dream? A trick of moonlight? Yet the image lingered, sharp and unsettling, like the first thread in a web of deception waiting to ensnare the unwary. Little did she know, in the quiet rooms below, the seeds of mystery had already taken root. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Guest. The first rays of dawn pierced the heavy curtains of Elmwood Manor like tentative fingers, gilding the edges of the dew-kissed lawns outside. The air held a crispness that spoke of autumn's advance, carrying the faint aroma of wood smoke from the village chimneys beyond the estate's wrought-iron gates. Inside, the household stirred with the rhythmic efficiency of a well-oiled clockwork, the clatter of silver in the kitchen, the soft tread of servants on polished floors, and the distant chime of the grandfather clock marking the hour. It was a morning much like any other in the countryside, where routines unfolded with the predictability of the seasons, until they didn't. Lady Evelyn Hargrove descended the grand staircase with her customary poise, her silk dressing-gown whispering against the banister. At 62, she retained the erect carriage of her youth, her silver hair swept into a chignon that brooked no disorder. She entered the morning room, where sunlight streamed through mullioned windows, casting diamond patterns on the damask tablecloth. The breakfast spread was laid out impeccably, porcelain teapots steaming with Earl Grey, racks of golden toast, pots of marmalade glowing like captured sunlight, and platters of kedgeree and devilled kidneys. Mr. Perkins, the butler, stood sentinel by the sideboard, his face as impassive as a marble bust. "Good morning, Perkins," Lady Evelyn said, her voice carrying the clipped authority of one accustomed to command. "Has everyone risen? I thought we'd have a full house for breakfast." Perkins inclined his head slightly. "Most of the guests are stirring, madam. Miss Beaumont and Captain Langford are in the conservatory taking coffee. Mrs. Voss sent word she'll join shortly. But Mr. Fairfax, his room appears unoccupied." Lady Evelyn paused, her hand hovering over the teacup. "Unoccupied? What do you mean? Has he gone for an early walk?" "I knocked at 8, madam, as per routine. No answer. Upon entering, with your permission implied in such circumstances, I found the bed unslept in. His suitcase is missing, though his evening attire from last night is neatly folded on the valet stand. No note, no sign of haste." A faint crease appeared between Lady Evelyn's brows, the first crack in her composed facade. How peculiar. Reginald isn't one for dawn rambles. He's a city creature through and through. Check the garage. Perhaps he motored off unexpectedly. Perkins bowed and withdrew, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Lady Evelyn poured her tea, stirring it absently, her mind sifting through the previous evening's conversations. Fairfax had been animated at dinner, debating the merits of foreign investments with Captain Langford. But there had been an undercurrent, a fleeting shadow in his eyes when the talk turned to personal fortunes. She recalled his offhand remark about pressing matters in town, dismissed at the time as mere politeness. Clara Beaumont entered then, her cheeks flushed from the conservatory's humid air, followed closely by Captain Langford. Clara wore a simple morning dress of sprigged muslin, her dark curls pinned loosely, exuding the effortless charm that turned heads in London drawing-rooms. The captain, in tweeds and a Norfolk jacket, looked every inch the country squire, though his military bearing betrayed a life of stricter disciplines. "Aunt Evelyn, what a glorious morning!" Clara exclaimed, helping herself to toast. "Arthur and I were admiring your orchids. They're positively exotic." Indeed, Langford added, his moustache twitching with approval. Reminds me of the botanical gardens in Calcutta. Fine specimens. Lady Evelyn managed a smile. I'm glad you're enjoying them. But have either of you seen Mr. Fairfax? Perkins says his room is empty. Clara's butter knife paused mid-stroke. Reginald? No, not since last night. He retired early, didn't he? Said something about a headache. Langford frowned, setting down his cup. Come to think of it, he did seem a bit off colour. Pale around the gills. Business worries, perhaps? Before Lady Evelyn could respond, Mrs. Lydia Voss swept in, her entrance announced by the rustle of taffeta and the clink of her ever-present bracelets. She was resplendent in a peignoir of lavender silk, her pearls replaced for the morning by a modest locket, though her makeup was already impeccably applied. "Good heavens, what a night!" she declared, sinking into a chair. "That bed is like sleeping on a cloud, far too soft for my liking. Where's our dashing financier? Don't tell me he's abandoned us already." "That's precisely the mystery," Lady Evelyn replied, her tone light but laced with concern. "Gone without a word, it seems." Perkins reappeared, his expression grave. "Madam, Mr. Fairfax's Bentley is still in the garage, untouched. The chauffeur confirms no one has taken it out." A hush fell over the table, broken only by the tick of the clock. Clara's eyes widened. "But that's impossible. He wouldn't just vanish, would he?" Langford cleared his throat. Perhaps a stroll turned into something more. The grounds are vast, easy to lose one's way if unfamiliar. "Nonsense," Mrs. Voss interjected, her voice sharp. "Reginald Fairfax isn't the type to wander off like a lost sheep. He's meticulous, always has been. Remember that time at the Cavendish ball? He planned every detail, down to the last waltz." Lady Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "Quite right. Perkins, organise a search of the grounds. Alert the staff, discreetly, mind you. We don't want to alarm anyone unnecessarily." As Perkins departed, Miss Jane Marple entered the room quietly, her presence almost overlooked amid the growing tension. She'd risen early, as was her habit, and spent the pre-breakfast hours in her room, knitting a complicated pattern of cables and twists while gazing out at the gardens. The view had been serene. Mist rising from the lawns, a gardener, Mr. Thorne, she believed, already at work pruning the hedges with methodical snips. Now sensing the undercurrents, she took a seat at the table's end, accepting a cup of tea with a murmured thanks. "Miss Marple," Lady Evelyn said, turning to her old friend, "you've heard? Our Mr. Fairfax has played the vanishing act." Miss Marple's eyes, bright and observant behind her spectacles, met Lady Evelyn's. "How very odd," she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle lilt of St. Mary Mead. "In my experience, people don't disappear without reason. Often, it's the small details that reveal the why and how." Clara leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean, Aunt Jane? Do you think something's amiss?" "Oh, I wouldn't presume," Miss Marple replied, buttering her toast with care. "But one recalls cases, like poor Colonel Prothero, who went missing for a day only to be found in his own library, asleep over his accounts. Though that ended rather differently, of course." Langford chuckled, though it sounded forced. "Well, let's hope Fairfax turns up with a similar explanation. I'll join the search, stretch my legs." The meal proceeded in fits and starts, conversation veering into awkward silences. Mrs. Voss prattled on about London gossip, but her eyes darted to the windows, as if expecting Fairfax to stroll in at any moment. Clara fidgeted with her napkin. Her earlier vivacity dimmed, while Langford excused himself to assist Perkins. Miss Marple observed them all, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically in her lap, a habit that allowed her mind to wander freely. She noted Clara's pallor, the way her gaze flickered toward the empty chair, Langford's brisk efficiency, masking perhaps a deeper unease, Mrs. Voss's forced gaiety, her fingers twisting the locket chain, and Lady Evelyn, ever the hostess maintaining calm while her thoughts clearly raced. An hour passed before Perkins returned, accompanied by the head gardener, Elias Thorne, and the young maid, Alice Turner. Thorne was a sturdy man of middling height, his face weathered like old leather, hands calloused from years of toil. Alice, in contrast, was a slip of a girl, no more than 19, with freckles dusting her nose and hair tucked under a crisp cap. She twisted her apron in her hands, eyes downcast. "Madam," Perkins began, "we've combed the gardens, the stables, even the boathouse by the lake. No sign of Mr. Fairfax. But young Alice here had something to say. She spoke to Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, who insisted we bring it to you." Lady Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Well, girl?" "Out with it." Alice swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was last night, ma'am. I couldn't sleep. The moon was so bright, shining right in my window. I looked out toward the gardens and I saw someone, by the rose arbor, digging." "Digging?" Mrs. Voss echoed, her hand flying to her throat. "At midnight? Whatever for?" "I don't know, ma'am." But they had a bundle, big, wrapped in cloth. They buried it, then smoothed the earth over. I thought it a dream at first, but it was real. The figure was tall, in a dark coat, face hidden. I was too scared to move. Clara gasped. "Buried? Like a body?" Now, Langford interjected, returning just in time to hear. "Let's not jump to conclusions." Could have been Thorne here, tending to some nocturnal pest. Thorne bristled, his eyes narrowing. "Not me, sir." "I lock up at dusk as always. Gardens don't need midnight meddling." Lady Evelyn stood, decisiveness etching her features. "This is serious." "Perkins, telephone the police at once. Inspector Craddock at the local station. He's handled matters here before." As Perkins hurried off, the room erupted into murmurs. Miss Marple set aside her knitting, her mind whirring like a well-tuned engine. A midnight burial in the garden? It evoked memories of a long-ago scandal in St. Mary Mead, where a villager's ghostly apparition turned out to be a smuggler, hiding contraband under the churchyard elms. But here, with a guest missing, the implications chilled her. The wait for the police stretched interminably, the group migrating to the drawing room, where a fire crackled in the grate, warding off the morning's chill. Clara paced by the French windows, peering out at the gardens. What if something dreadful happened? Reginald was acting strangely yesterday, distracted, almost furtive. Was he? Mrs. Voss probed, her curiosity piqued. I noticed him glancing at his watch repeatedly during dinner, as if expecting a summons. Langford lit his pipe, puffing thoughtfully. Chap mentioned a telegram he was awaiting. Business, he said. Perhaps it arrived late, and he dashed off without his car. Took a taxi from the village. But why bury something? Clara pressed. It doesn't fit. Miss Marple, from her armchair, interposed gently. People bury things for many reasons. Treasure, secrets, regrets. In my village, old Mr. Clements buried his wife's jewellery after a quarrel, only to forget where. caused quite a stir when the plough turned it up. Thorn, lingering by the door, snorted. "If it's my garden disturbed, I'll know." Soil tells tales, fresh turned, it'd show. Before more could be said, the crunch of gravel announced the police arrival. Inspector Derek Craddock strode in, a solid man in his 40s with a no-nonsense moustache and eyes that missed little. Accompanying him was Sergeant Fletcher, notebook at the ready. Craddock greeted Lady Evelyn with a respectful nod. "Lady Hargrove, troubling business from what your butler described. A missing guest and a nocturnal digger." "Precisely," she confirmed, outlining the facts with crisp efficiency. The inspector listened, then turned to Alice. "Right, miss. Tell me exactly what you saw. No embellishments." Alice repeated her tale, her voice gaining strength under his steady gaze. "The figure was tall, taller than Mr. Thorn here. Moved careful-like, not hurried. The bundle was heavy. They grunted lowering it, then spade work, quick and quiet." Craddock nodded. "And the spot, precise as you can." "By the rose arbour, Inspector." "Where the climbers twine thickest. Shadowy there, even in moonlight." "Very well. Fletcher, fetch the tools from the car. We'll dig." The party followed to the garden, a procession under the now bright sun. The air buzzed with bees among the late-blooming asters, a stark contrast to the sombre mood. Thorn led the way, grumbling about uprooted plants. At the arbour, a picturesque arch of thorny stems heavy with crimson blooms, Craddock examined the ground. The earth appeared pristine, mulched neatly, no signs of tampering. "Looks untouched," he muttered. "You sure this is the place, girl?" Alice nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir." "Right there, under the biggest bush." Fletcher began digging, his spade slicing into the soil with rhythmic thuds. The group watched in tense silence. Lady Evelyn, impassive, Clara clutching Langford's arm, Mrs. Voss fanning herself despite the cool air, Thorn scowling. Miss Marple stood a little apart, her eyes scanning not just the hole, but the surrounding beds. The faint footprints in the dew-damp grass, the clipped hedge nearby. A stray leaf caught on a thorn. Deeper the hole went, yielding only rich loam and a few wriggling worms. No bundle, no disturbance beyond the natural. Craddock straightened, wiping his brow. "Nothing. Perhaps a trick of the light, miss." Moonlight plays games with the eyes. Alice's face crumpled. "But I saw it. Clear as day. Night. Easy now," Craddock soothed. "We'll check further. Meantime, let's hear from the rest." Back in the drawing room, preliminary statements were taken. Lady Evelyn described the dinner, Fairfax's demeanour. He seemed his usual self, charming if a tad preoccupied. Clara admitted to a brief chat with him in the hall post-dinner. He wished me well on my engagement. Nothing more. Langford confirmed retiring early. Headache, as I said. Slept like a log. Mrs. Voss mentioned hearing footsteps around midnight. In the corridor, soft like someone tiptoeing. I assumed it was a servant. Thorn, questioned separately, denied any late-night activity. Bed by 10, up at dawn. Ask the missus, she'll vouch. Throughout, Miss Marple sipped her tea, her contributions minimal but pointed. "Inspector, might one examine Mr. Fairfax's room? Sometimes the absent speak through what they leave behind." Craddock acquiesced, and the group ascended. Fairfax's chamber was a model of order, bed made or unslept in, evening suit folded, a half-smoked cigar in the ashtray, emitting a faint tobacco scent. On the nightstand, a book, Travels in South America, lay open to a chapter on Buenos Aires. His toiletries remained, but personal papers were absent. Odd, Craddock noted. Leaves his car, his clothes, but takes his case. Planned departure? Or interrupted, Miss Marple murmured, peering at the cigar. Smoked halfway. Perhaps he was disturbed mid-thought. As the inspector probed further, a telegram arrived, delivered by the postboy. Addressed to Fairfax, it read, Urgent, deal collapsing, return immediately, Harris. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened. His partner in the city. This explains the preoccupation. Craddock pocketed it. Motive for a hasty exit. But why the secrecy? And the garden business? The afternoon wore on with more searches. The woods fringing the estate, the lake's reedy shores, but Fairfax remained elusive. Whispers spread among the staff, a curse on the manor, or a lover's elopement gone awry. Alice, relegated to kitchen duties, fretted silently, her certainty unshaken. Miss Marple wandered the gardens alone, her stout shoes crunching gravel paths. She paused at the arbour, kneeling awkwardly to inspect the soil. No overt signs, but the mulch seemed fresher in one spot, as if recently raked. Clever, she whispered to herself, but not quite clever enough. Dusk fell, casting long shadows, and still no trace. Inspector Craddock departed with promises of wider inquiries, checks at stations, ports. Likely a voluntary vanishing, he opined. Debts from what London whispers. But as the household gathered for a subdued tea, tension simmered. Clara confided in Miss Marple by the fire. I feel watched, Aunt Jane. Like the garden holds a secret it's dying to spill. Miss Marple patted her hand. Gardens do. That, my dear. They nurture life, and sometimes death. We must wait for the roots to show. Outside, the moon rose again, bathing the arbour in silver. And in the attics, Alice peered out once more, half dreading what she might see. The mystery of Reginald Fairfax hung over Elmwood Manor like a pall, its threads just beginning to unravel in the keen mind of the unassuming spinster from St. Mary Mead. Chapter 3. Shadows of Suspicion. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall sash windows of Elmwood Manor, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusatory fingers across the Persian rugs. The air in the drawing-room hung heavy with the scent of beeswax polish and wilting lilies from a vase on the mantel, their petals curling in silent defeat. Inspector Craddock had commandeered the space as his makeshift headquarters. A mahogany desk cleared of its usual bric-a-brac to accommodate his notebook. A stubby pencil and a thermos of strong tea provided by the ever-efficient Perkins. The inspector paced slowly, his boots thudding softly on the floorboards, while Sergeant Fletcher stood by the door, his young face etched with the earnest concentration of one eager to prove his mettle. Outside, the gardens lay deceptively tranquil, the rose arbour now cordoned off with makeshift twine strung between stakes. A stark reminder of Alice's eerie testimony. Gardeners and stable hands had been dismissed to their quarters. Their mutterings about city folk bringing trouble echoing faintly through the corridors. The household guests confined to the manor under the guise of assisting inquiries moved like ghosts in their own domain, their conversations hushed and fragmented, laced with the unspoken fear that one among them might hold the key to Reginald Fairfax's enigmatic absence. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her hands folded in her lap, like a queen enduring an unwelcome audience. She had changed into a sombre afternoon gown of dove-grey silk, its severity underscoring the gravity of the situation. "Inspector!" she began, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of impatience. Must we rehash every detail? You've heard the basics. Reginald was a guest, a friend of sorts. Through business connections, you understand. He arrived yesterday, dined with us, and now, poof, vanished like smoke. Craddock settled into the opposite chair, his eyes keen under bushy brows. Details, Lady Hargrove, are the bricks of any investigation. You mentioned debts earlier. Care to elaborate? She hesitated, glancing toward the window where Miss Marple could be seen strolling the gravel path, her figure diminutive yet purposeful. Reginald confided in me privately after luncheon yesterday. His firm, Fairfax and Harris Stockbrokers, is teetering. Bad investments, market fluctuations. He owed substantial sums, including to some rather unforgiving creditors. He joked about it, but his laugh was hollow. Said he might need to liquidate assets, soon. Assets, Craddock echoed, jotting notes. Did he specify? Jewellery, perhaps, or something more portable? Lady Evelyn's lips thinned. Nothing explicit. But he eyed Mrs. Voss's sapphire brooch during dinner. Admiringly, I thought. She's quite proud of it, you know. Acquired it recently from a discreet dealer in Bond Street. The inspector nodded, filing the tidbit away. And your relationship with him? Strictly social? Indeed, we've known each other for years through mutual acquaintances. No entanglements, if that's what you're implying. Her tone sharpened, a flash of the steel beneath her composure. As she rose to leave, Craddock called after her. One more thing. Did Fairfax mention any enemies? Rivals in business? She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. The city is a jungle, Inspector. Everyone has rivals, but Reginald? He played the game shrewdly. If he had foes, he kept them at arm's length. With that she departed, her footsteps fading down the hall. Next entered Clara Beaumont, her youthful beauty marred by dark circles under her eyes, as if sleep had eluded her since the dawn discovery. She perched on the edge of the chair, twisting a handkerchief in her slender fingers. "This is all so dreadful," she murmured. "Poor Reginald. Do you think harm has come to him?" "That's what we're ascertaining, Miss Beaumont," Craddock replied gently. "You were engaged in conversation with him yesterday afternoon, I believe." "In the conservatory?" Clara flushed slightly, her cheeks blooming like the orchids she had admired earlier. "Yes, just a chat. About my upcoming wedding to Arthur, Captain Langford. Reginald congratulated me, but he seemed wistful. Said marriage was a gamble, like the stock market. One wrong choice, and you're bankrupt, he quipped. Wistful? Craddock probed. Had he romantic interest in you? She averted her gaze. Once, perhaps. He proposed last year in London. I refused, politely. My heart was with Arthur even then. Reginald accepted it gracefully, or so I thought. But yesterday there was a sharpness in his tone. He accused me of toying with men's affections, called me a siren leading ships to rocks. It was unlike him, almost bitter. The inspector leaned forward. And how did you respond? I laughed it off, told him not to be silly, but it stung. Arthur overheard the tail end and stepped in, suggesting Reginald cool off with a walk. They exchanged words, nothing heated, but tense. Craddock made a note. Thank you, miss. That'll be all for now. As Clara exited, brushing past Captain Langford in the doorway, the captain strode in with military precision, his moustache bristling like a hedgehog on alert. He saluted informally and took the seat without invitation. Fire away, Inspector. I've faced worse interrogations in the Punjab. Captain, Craddock began, You retired from the army recently, I gather. India service. 20 years, man and boy. Saw action in the frontier. Pathans you. No, tough as nails. Retired on half pay, now engaged to Clara. Fine girl. Steady as they come. Indeed, and your interaction with Fairfax yesterday. Miss Beaumont mentioned a quarrel. Langford harumphed. Quarrel? Hardly. The chap was out of line, badgering Clara about her flirtations. I told him to button it, that's all. He backed down, muttered an apology, and stalked off toward the gardens. Last I saw of him. Time? Around 4, tea time approaching. I puffed a pipe in the billiard room after. Craddock eyed him steadily. Any bad blood between you two, Prior? None. Met him a few times in town. Clubs, that sort. Seemed a decent sort, if a bit slick. But if he insulted my fiancée again... Langford's fist clenched briefly on his knee. Understood, Craddock said. Your whereabouts last night? Retired at 10:30, read a bit, Kipling, fittingly, then lights out. Slept sound, no disturbances. As Langford departed, Mrs. Lydia Voss sailed in, her presence announced by a waft of expensive perfume, a blend of jasmine and intrigue. She arranged herself dramatically on the settee, fanning her face with a lace handkerchief. Inspector, this is positively Gothic. A vanishing guest midnight diggers. It's like one of those dreadful novels my maid devours. Reality often trumps fiction, Mrs. Voss, Craddock replied dryly. Your impressions of Fairfax? A charming rogue, she said, her eyes sparkling with recollection. We've crossed paths at auctions, galas. He has had an eye for valuables. Complimented my sapphire brooch last night. Said it rivaled the crown jewels. I keep it locked in my room safe, of course. Valuable, is it? Priceless, darling. Inherited from an aunt, but enhanced with recent acquisitions. Reginald hinted at appraising it for insurance. Offered his services gratis. Craddock's pencil scratched. Did you accept? Heavens, no. I trust my own jeweller. But he persisted, almost oddly insistent. And last night? You heard footsteps. Yes, around midnight. Creaky boards in the hall. I peeked out, saw a shadow flit past toward the stairs. Too dim to identify, but tallish, male perhaps. Thank you, Craddock said, dismissing her. The servants followed. Perkins, unflappable, confirmed locking the doors at 11. No unusual occurrences. The housekeeper, Mrs. Hargreaves, vouched for the staff's routines. Then Elias Thorne, the gardener, slouched in, his boots leaving faint mud traces despite Perkins' glare. Mr. Thorne, Craddock started, you deny being in the garden last night. Aye, Thorne growled, his accent thick with Devon burr. Home by dusk, supper with the wife in the cottage. She'll swear to it. Your opinion of Fairfax? City toff, trampling my beds like they were pavements. Yesterday, he wandered through crushing my prize delphiniums. I told him off, sharpish. He laughed, said gardens were for enjoyment, not worship. Cheeky sod. Any threats? Thorne's eyes flickered. No more than words, but if he'd ruined more. Finally, Alice Turner, trembling like a leaf in a gale. I ain't lying, sir, she insisted. Saw it plain. The digging, the bundle. Craddock softened. Describe the figure again. Tall, broad-shouldered, coat with a high collar. Moved deliberate, like they knew the ground. As interviews concluded, Craddock conferred with Fletcher. Motives aplenty, debts, jealousy, insults, but no body, no crime, yet. Meanwhile, Miss Marple meandered the gardens, her knitting bag swinging gently. She paused at the arbour, fingering a rose petal, its thorns pricking lightly. Sharp, like truths, she mused. Nearby, a flower bed caught her eye. Soil slightly mounded, weeds pulled haphazardly. Not Thorn's meticulous work. She ventured to the tool shed, finding it unlocked. Inside, spades hung neatly, but one bore fresh earth clods, unlike the other's dry patina. Used recently, she noted, recalling a poacher in St. Mary Mead who buried traps similarly. Tea time brought the group together in the library, a room lined with leather-bound tomes and the faint must of aged paper. Captain Langford proposed his theory boldly. Fairfax bolted for the continent, staged it all. Debts mounting, creditors closing in. I've seen chaps do it in the regiments. Desert with a flourish. Mrs. Voss tittered. With a buried bundle? Hardly standard luggage. Clara shivered. What if it's him, buried there? Nonsense, Lady Evelyn snapped. The police dug. Nothing. Miss Marple, sipping Darjeeling, interjected mildly. Appearances deceive. Like that time in my village, a buried treasure turned out to be old boots. But sometimes it's more. Langford persisted. He could have an accomplice, slipped away in the night. Thorn, serving wood for the fire, overheard and muttered, If anyone's digging unauthorized, it's trespass. Evening deepened, rain pattering against panes like insistent fingers. Inspector Craddock returned with news from London. Fairfax's firm confirmed embezzlement suspicions. He'd siphoned funds. Motive for flight, he announced, but Miss Marple, alone with Clara later, probed deeper. My dear, that proposal, did Fairfax take rejection hard? Clara nodded. He wrote letters after pleading. I burned them. Arthur knows nothing. He'd be furious. In the servants' hall, Alice confided in the cook. The bundle. It gleamed wet in the moon, dark stains, like ink, or worse. Word spread, twisting like vines. Night fell, the manor creaking under wind's assault. Miss Marple, in her room, knitted by lamplight, patterns emerging like clues. A knock, Lady Evelyn. Jane, your thoughts. People hide what shames them, Miss Marple said. Fairfax planned escape, but crossed someone lethal. Outside, shadows stirred. Alice, vigilant, glimpsed movement again, digging resumed. She stifled a cry. Dawn would bring revelations, but for now, suspicions shadowed every corner. Chapter 4. Whispers and Clues. The gloaming settled over Elmwood Manor, like a velvet shroud. The sky bruised with purples and indigos as the last vestiges of daylight bled away. Rain had ceased its relentless tattoo against the panes, leaving behind a world washed clean, yet somehow more foreboding. The gardens glistening under a rising moon that promised to unveil secrets or conceal them further. Inside, the library served as a sanctuary of sorts, its walls insulated with rows of gilt-embossed volumes that whispered of forgotten intrigues and resolved enigmas. A fire crackled in the cavernous hearth, casting flickering glows that danced across the faces of the assembled party, etching lines of worry deeper into their features. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, ever the pillar of resilience, had decreed an early supper in the adjoining dining room, but appetites were scant, plates pushed away half-touched. Now, back in the library, the group clustered around low tables laden with brandy decanters and coffee services, the air thick with the aroma of aged spirits and fresh ground beans. Captain Arthur Langford, his military posture unyielding even in repose, nursed a tumbler of scotch. His eyes narrowed as if sighting an enemy across a distant plain. Beside him, Clara Beaumont leaned into the arm of the settee, her fingers tracing idle patterns on the brocade, her earlier flush replaced by a pallor that spoke of inner turmoil. Mrs. Lydia Voss, undeterred by the atmosphere, adjusted her shawl with a flourish, her jewels catching the firelight like distant stars. "Well," she declared, her voice cutting through the hush like a well-honed blade, "if we're to play at detectives, let's have it out. Reginald didn't vanish into thin air. Someone knows something." Her gaze swept the room, lingering a fraction longer on each face, as if daring contradiction. Inspector Craddock, who had lingered for this informal gathering at Lady Evelyn's insistence, cleared his throat from his perch by the window. "Speculation can be useful, madam, but facts are our foundation. We've established motive, debts, and opportunity, with the household abed. But means, that's the puzzle." Captain Langford set his glass down with a decisive clink. "Staged, I tell you. Fairfax is no fool. He's engineered this to throw creditors off the scent. Slipped out under cover of dark, perhaps with a valise of valuables. That telegram was the catalyst. Panic set in, and off he went." Clara stirred, her voice soft but edged. "But the bundle Alice saw? If it's staging, why bury anything? It draws attention, not diverts it." "Distraction," Langford countered, warming to his theme. "Buries rubbish to mimic foul play, buys time while he flees. I've read of such ruses in the papers, insurance frauds, elopements disguised as abductions." Mrs. Voss leaned forward, her eyes alight with the thrill of conjecture. Or perhaps it's treasure. Reginald was forever hinting at hidden assets. What if he cached something valuable in the garden, stocks, bonds, even gold, and meant to retrieve it later, but someone else got wind and intervened? Lady Evelyn arched an eyebrow. "Lydia, your imagination runs riot. Reginald was discreet, not dramatic, though," she added thoughtfully, "he did inquire about the manor's history yesterday. Old smuggling tales, hidden compartments. I showed him the priest hole in the chapel, but he seemed disinterested." Miss Jane Marple, who had been quietly ensconced in a wing-back chair near the fire, her knitting needles clicking a steady rhythm, like a metronome for her thoughts, looked up at this. Her spectacles glinted as she tilted her head. "Hidden things," she murmured, almost to herself. "Yes, people do love their secrets. In St. Mary Mead, there was a gentleman who buried his war medals in the vicarage garden, shame over a court-martial, you see. Dug them up years later, only to find they'd tarnished beyond recognition. A metaphor, perhaps." The inspector turned to her, his expression a mix of amusement and respect. "Miss Marple, you've a way with parallels. Any insights on our vanishing financier?" "Oh, I'm no detective, Inspector," she demurred, her fingers never pausing in their intricate dance with wool. "Merely an observer of human nature. But one wonders about that book in his room. South American travels. Planning a distant haven. Buenos Aires is said to be welcoming to those with means, or so I've read in the Times." Craddock nodded. "We've wired Interpol, just in case." Ports and airports on alert. As the conversation ebbed, Miss Marple set aside her knitting and rose with surprising agility for her years. "If you'll excuse me, a breath of air might clear the mind." The gardens call, even in the damp. Lady Evelyn frowned. "Jane, it's dark out. Take a lantern." "Nonsense, Evelyn. The moon suffices. Besides, I shan't wander far." With a nod she slipped out through the French doors, the cool night air rushing in like an uninvited guest. The gardens enveloped her in a symphony of nocturnal sounds. The drip of residual rain from leaves, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the distant hoot of an owl proclaiming its territory. Miss Marple's sensible shoes crunched softly on the gravel path, her shawl drawn tight against the chill. She made her way toward the rose arbour, now a silhouette of twisted vines under the lunar glow. The police tape fluttered faintly in the breeze, a modern intrusion in this timeless setting. Pausing at the sight of the futile dig, she knelt carefully, her fingers sifting the soil. It was loose, aerated, but something caught her eye, a glint in the mulch. With delicate precision, she unearthed a small button, brass and embossed with a faint crest. "From a coat, perhaps," she whispered, pocketing it. Rising, she scanned the surrounding beds, noting how the shadows played tricks, much like memories. A twig snapped nearby, and she turned sharply. Elias Thorne emerged from the gloom, a lantern in hand, his face a mask of suspicion. "Miss, what are you doing out here? Grounds are off-limits after dark." Miss Marple smiled serenely. "Just a stroll, Mr. Thorne. Gardens have a way of revealing themselves at night, don't you find? The scents are stronger, the secrets closer to the surface." He grunted, setting the lantern down. "Secrets? Aye, soil holds 'em. But poking about won't help. Police already turned it over." "Indeed, but tell me, those delphiniums Fairfax trampled, were they your pride?" Thorne's jaw tightened. "Years of breeding, ruined in a moment. City folk think Earth's just dirt, but it's life, blood almost." "Blood," Miss Marple echoed softly. "A strong word. In my village, a gardener once quarrelled over prized marrows, led to fisticuffs. Tempers flare over such things." "Not me," Thorne muttered, but his eyes shifted. "I words with him, that's all." As he lumbered away, Miss Marple continued her circuit, her mind piecing fragments like a jigsaw. Back indoors, she rejoined the group, who had shifted to cards in a bid for normalcy. Clara dealt a hand of bridge, but her concentration faltered. "Aunt Jane," she said, laying down a card, "you look thoughtful." "Find anything?" "Only the peace of the night, my dear." But her eyes twinkled, though one does ponder footsteps. Mrs. Voss heard them. Might others have? Langford discarded abruptly. "I heard nothing. Solid sleeper." But Mrs. Voss nodded. "Yes, and that shadow. Definitely masculine. Broad shoulders like the captain here, no offence." Langford chuckled. "None taken. But if it's me you're suspecting, I assure you, my prowling days ended with the army." The game dissolved into desultory chat, but Miss Marple steered it subtly. "Captain, your Indian tales fascinate. Ever encounter disappearances there? Fakirs vanishing in crowds, that sort of thing?" "Ah, plenty. Once, a sepoy deserted, staged a drowning, body never found. Turned up in Bombay, new identity, clever but betrayal leaves traces." "Traces," Miss Marple mused. "Like that cigar in Fairfax's room, half-smoked, interrupted perhaps." Craddock, listening from the sidelines, perked up. "We've analysed it. Fine Havana, matches his humidor. No poison, if that's the thought." No, she said, merely timing. Smoked after dinner before bed, a knock at the door, a summons. Clara paled. "You think someone lured him out?" "Possible," the inspector admitted. "No signs of struggle, though." As midnight approached, the party dispersed, footsteps echoing in the halls like accusations. Miss Marple, in her room, examined the button under lamplight. It bore a monogram. R.F. Reginald's, she wondered, but coats have many buttons. Dawn broke with a telegram for Craddock. Fairfax's London flat ransacked, safe empty. Flight confirmed, he pondered aloud at breakfast. But Alice, serving porridge, overheard and trembled. "Sir, The bundle, it was long, like a rug rolled tight, and stained. I didn't say before, feared it imagination. Craddock pressed. Stained how? Dark. Patches, sir. Moon made 'em blackish, like oil, or blood. The room froze. Lady Evelyn recovered first. Girl, why hold back? Frightened, ma'am. Thought I'd be blamed. Inspector ordered a redig, this time wider. Shovels bit earth, revealing nothing. But nearby, in a compost heap screened by yews, soil yielded oddly. Fletcher unearthed a spade with crusted dirt, fresh. Thorn summoned, blustered. My tool, but I mulch daily. Miss Marple, observing, noted the heap's warmth, recent activity. Compost hides well, she said. Heat breaks down evidence. Afternoon brought London detectives. Fairfax owed thousands, including to a shady lender known for strong-arm tactics. Perhaps they caught up, Craddock speculated. But Miss Marple, tea in hand, conversed with Perkins. The hall clock, does it chime loudly? Aye, miss. Wakes the dead, some say. And Fairfax's room overlooks the drive? Yes, clear view. She nodded, filing it. Evening, in the conservatory amid exotic blooms, Clara confided in Miss Marple. Reginald's letters, after rejection, they turned nasty. Threats of exposure. I had a youthful folly, a flirtation with a married man. Nothing came of it, but scandal. Miss Marple patted her. Blackmail? Men scorned to act rashly. Did Arthur know? No, he'd challenge him to a duel. In the servants' quarters, Alice whispered to Perkins. I saw Thorn out late, after the first dig, fiddling with the heap. Word reached Craddock, who confronted Thorn. Explain. Rats, Thorn growled. Checking traps. But doubt lingered. Night deepened, rain resuming. Miss Marple, sleepless, heard creaks, footsteps. She crept to the window, spying a figure by the arbour, digging anew. Alerting Craddock quietly, they watched. It was Thorn, unearthing something small, reburying hastily. Arrest followed. Suspicion, Craddock said. What's hidden? Thorn clammed up. Miss Marple pondered. Not the bundle, but related? Clues whispered, puzzle nearing shape. Chapter 5. The Gardener's Secret. The first light of dawn crept over the Devon hills like a reluctant witness, painting the skies in hues of pale rose and gold that belied the storm clouds gathering within Elmwood Manor's walls. Rain from the previous night had left the world sodden, puddles mirroring the manor's stern facade, and the gardens transformed into a labyrinth of slick paths and dripping foliage. The arrest of Elias Thorn had sent ripples through the household, whispers multiplying like shadows in the corridors, each servant and guest grappling with the implications of a trusted groundskeeper turned suspect in the dead of night. Inspector Derek Craddock, his face etched with the weariness of a man who had snatched only fitful sleep on a lumpy armchair in the library, paced the flagstone floor of the manor's old scullery, now repurposed as a makeshift holding cell. Thorn sat on a wooden bench, his wrists manacled loosely to a ring in the wall, a precaution more symbolic than necessary given his stoic demeanour. The gardener's weathered features were set in a mask of defiance, his eyes, usually shaded by the brim of his cap, now glaring at the inspector with the intensity of a man cornered in his own domain. "Right, Thorn," Craddock began, his voice echoing off the stone walls like a judge's gavel. "You've had the night to stew. Time to talk. What were you digging for out there? And don't feed me that rot about rats again. We found no traps, just fresh earth turned over like a grave." Thorn shifted, the chains clinking softly. "Rats it was, Inspector. Gardens full of 'em this time of year. Burrow under the roots, ruin the lot. I set snares, check 'em quiet like so as not to wake the house." Sergeant Fletcher, notebook in hand, snorted from his post by the door. "At 2 in the morning, with the rain bucketing down, pull the other one." The gardener's jaw worked, as if chewing on unspoken words. "Can't sleep sometimes. Wife says it's the war. Old wounds aching in the wet. I walk the grounds, tend to things. No law against that." Craddock leaned in, his breath fogging the chill air. "No, but there's law against tampering with a potential crime scene. You were seen, man, by reliable eyes. Digging something up, then reburying. What was it? Fairfax's belongings, or worse?" Thorne's gaze flickered, a momentary crack in his armour. "Nothing to do with that toff. He was trouble, trampling my beds, sneering at honest work. But I didn't touch him, swear on my spade." The inspector straightened, exchanging a glance with Fletcher. "We'll see about that. You're staying put till we crack this. Fletcher, keep watch. I'll update the household." As Craddock emerged into the hallway, the manor buzzed with subdued activity. Perkins, the butler, glided past with a tray of morning tea, his face a study in professional neutrality, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. In the morning room, the guests assembled around the breakfast table, the clink of cutlery punctuating the tense silence. Lady Evelyn Hargrove presided at the head, her posture impeccable, but her teacup trembled slightly as she lifted it. "Inspector," she said as he entered, "any progress?" "Thorne's arrest has the staff in an uproar. Mrs. Hargreaves threatens to resign if he's mistreated. She's known him since he was a lad." Craddock accepted a cup from Perkins, stirring in sugar with deliberate slowness. "He's denying everything, ma'am. Claims nocturnal pest control, but we'll break him. Meantime, I've wired for reinforcements, a forensic chap from London to sift the compost heap properly." Clara Beaumont, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night, set down her untouched toast. "It's unimaginable. Thorne always seemed so rooted, like part of the landscape. Could he really have?" Captain Langford, buttering his muffin with military precision, interjected, "Never trust the quiet ones, my dear. In India, the bearers who smiled widest often hid the sharpest knives. If Fairfax crossed him, over those flowers, say, tempers snap." Mrs. Lydia Voss, wrapped in a cashmere shawl against the morning chill, leaned forward eagerly. "But what motive? A quarrel over delphiniums? Hardly worth murder, unless there's more. Perhaps Fairfax discovered Thorne poaching, or worse, embezzling from the estate funds." Lady Evelyn shot her a sharp look. "Lydia, that's baseless. Thorne's accounts are audited yearly, spotless." Miss Jane Marple, seated unobtrusively by the window with her knitting bag at her feet, looked up from her cup. The sunlight caught her spectacles, turning them into twin mirrors of quiet scrutiny. "People are like gardens, aren't they?" she said softly, her voice threading through the conversation like a gentle breeze. "Layers upon layers, topsoil hiding roots tangled with secrets. In St. Mary Mead, our sexton buried more than bodies. He hid pilfered church silver under the yew tree. Discovered when a storm uprooted it. Nature has a way of exposing what's concealed." Craddock turned to her, intrigued despite himself. "You think Thorne's hiding something unrelated to Fairfax?" "Oh, I wouldn't presume, Inspector. But gardeners deal in growth and decay. What one plants in spring may rot by autumn. Perhaps Mr. Thorne's secret is older, deeper." The group fell silent, pondering her words. Clara shivered. Aunt Jane, you make it sound poetic. But if Thorn's involved, what of the bundle Alice saw? His height matches, tall, broad. Langford nodded. And that spade in the shed, caked with earth. Miss Marple spotted it yesterday. Miss Marple inclined her head modestly. Merely observant, Captain. But one wonders about timing. If Thorn struck in rage, why bury clothes and not the body? Unless distraction. Before Craddock could probe further, Perkins entered, bearing a salver with a telegram. For you, Inspector, from London. Craddock tore it open, his brow furrowing as he read. Fairfax's creditors, one in particular, a loan shark named Victor Slade. Known for rough methods. Slade was seen in Devon 2 days ago, inquiring after Fairfax. Could be a lead, external foul play. Mrs. Voss gasped dramatically. A thug? Here! Heavens, we could all be in danger! Nonsense! Lady Evelyn snapped. The Manor is secure. But, Inspector, pursue it. Thorn might be a red herring. As breakfast concluded, Miss Marple excused herself, slipping out to the gardens with the grace of a shadow. The air was crisp, laced with the earthy tang of wet soil and blooming chrysanthemums. She wandered toward Thorn's cottage, a modest stone dwelling nestled at the estate's edge, its thatched roof sagging like a weary brow. Mrs. Thorn, a plump woman with flour-dusted hands, answered her knock, her eyes wary. Miss Marple, from the big house, what brings you? A word, if I may, Miss Marple said kindly, about your husband. The police are hard on him, but perhaps you know something to help. Mrs. Thorn hesitated, then ushered her into a cosy kitchen, redolent of baking bread. Elias is a good man, miss. Fought in the trenches, came back changed, nightmares, you see. Walks to clear his head. But harm Mr. Fairfax, never, though that toff did rile him sore. Over the flowers, aye, and more. Elias overheard him in the garden, talking on that fancy telephone gadget, bragging about swindling folk, laughing at ruin. Elias lost his savings in a bad investment years back. City sharpies, like Fairfax. It burned him. Miss Marple nodded sympathetically. Anger festers. Did he confront him? No, miss. But that night, he went out late. Said to check fences. Came back muddy, quiet. I didn't press. As Miss Marple departed, her mind whirred. Back at the Manor she sought Alice in the scullery, where the girl scrubbed pots with vigour born of nerves. Alice, dear, Miss Marple began gently, you're sighting. That bundle. Shaped like a rug, you said, but size? Could it hold a man? Alice paused, suds dripping from her hands. No, miss. Narrower, longer. Like clothes bundled tight, and the stains, dark, sticky-looking in the light. Sticky, Miss Marple echoed. Like blood? Or perhaps paint. Thorn mixes his own fertilizers. Blood meal, they call it. Stains terribly. Alice's eyes widened. Blood meal. For the roses. He hauls sacks of it. A clue, perhaps. Miss Marple thanked her and ventured to the tool shed, where tools gleamed in orderly rows. A sack in the corner. Blood meal. Half empty, with dark granules spilling. Fertilizer, she murmured, or cover for something redder. Lunch was a strained affair in the dining room, silver gleaming under chandeliers that swayed faintly in draughts. Craddock reported no breakthroughs from Thorn's interrogation. He clung to his story like ivy to stone. But we're searching his cottage now. If there's evidence, Clara pushed her soup away. This waiting is agony. Reginald, alive or dead, and Thorn, glowering like a storm cloud. Langford patted her hand. Chin up, darling. Truth outs, like in those jungle hunts. Prey always leaves spoor. Mrs. Voss, sipping sherry steered the talk to lighter scandals. "Remember the Duke's disappearance last season? Turned out eloping with the governess. Perhaps Reginald had a paramour tucked away." Lady Evelyn scoffed. "Reginald? A bachelor through and through. Though he did receive a letter yesterday, pink envelope, perfume-scented. I glimpsed it in the post." Craddock perked. "Letter? Where is it? In his room, I suppose?" "Perkins," the butler confirmed. "Unopened, sir. On the dresser." Fetched promptly, the envelope bore a London postmark, script flowing and feminine. Craddock slit it open, reading aloud. "Dearest Reg, must see you urgently. Debts mounting, your promise. Meet Midnight Garden. Yours, E." "E?" Clara gasped. "Who?" Mrs. Voss's eyes sparkled. "Evelyn. No, surely not." Lady Evelyn flushed. "Absurd. My name, but not my hand." Miss Marple examined the paper. Cheap, stationery, looping script, a woman's plea or trap. Craddock pocketed it. "We'll trace the postmark." Meanwhile, Slade's alibi, shaky, seen at a pub nearby night of disappearance. Afternoon brought the forensic expert, a bespectacled man named Dr. Hargrove, no relation, with soil samples and magnifiers. He pored over the compost heap, unearthing fibres, cloth stained dark. "Blood?" Craddock asked. "Possibly." Lab tests needed, but human hair too, dark like Fairfax's. Gasps rippled. Thorne, informed, protested innocence. "Planted! Someone framing me." Miss Marple, observing from afar, noted Dr. Hargrove's tools, a pipette drawing liquid from a puddle. "Rain dilutes," she said, "but stains persist." Evening drew in, lamps lit against encroaching dusk. In the drawing-room, tension simmered. Clara confided in Miss Marple by the piano. That letter, E could be Edith, Reginald's sister. But she died years ago. Or Emma, Miss Marple suggested. "Thorne's wife, Emma Thorne," Clara startled. "You think she—" "Secrets intertwine. Perhaps Fairfax preyed on her too." A scream pierced the air. Alice from upstairs. Rushing up, they found her by the attic window. "Again! Digging in the woods, beyond the garden." Craddock mobilized, lanterns bobbing as they searched. In a thicket, fresh earth, but empty. "Decoy," he muttered. Back inside, Miss Marple pieced it. Thorne's walks, wife's worry, blood mill stains mimicking blood. "He protects something," she whispered. Night deepened, Manor locked tight. Miss Marple, abed but alert, heard scratches, mice, or clues scratching at truth's door. Dawn's revelation awaited, Gardener's secret blooming like a poisonous flower. Chapter 6. Unravelling Threads. The pale light of morning filtered through the mist-shrouded trees surrounding Elmwood Manor, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape that seemed more suited to a dream than the grim reality unfolding. Dew clung to every leaf and blade of grass, turning the grounds into a shimmering carpet that belied the horror lurking just beyond the manicured borders. The previous night's commotion, the scream from Alice, the frantic search in the woods, had left the household in a state of suspended animation, nerves frayed like old ropes ready to snap. Now, as the clock in the hall struck 7, a new urgency propelled the inhabitants from their beds, drawn by the insistent barking of a gamekeeper's hound echoing from the distant copse. Inspector Craddock, his coat still damp from the nocturnal excursion, stood at the manor's threshold, his face a map of creases born from exhaustion and determination. Sergeant Fletcher flanked him, lantern in hand though daylight was breaking, while the gamekeeper, a burly man named Josiah Reed, hurried up the drive, his dog straining at the leash. Reed's cheeks were flushed, his breath coming in puffs of vapour. "Inspector! You must come quick. Old Bess here. She's on to something in the thicket. Dug up earth, and, well, sir, it's not pretty." Craddock's eyes sharpened. "Lead on, Reed." "Fletcher, alert the doctor. We'll need him. And fetch Thorn from holding. He might shed light if confronted." The procession moved swiftly through the gardens, past the rose arbour where so much suspicion had rooted, into the wilder woods that fringed the estate. The air grew thicker here, redolent with the scent of moss and decaying leaves, the undergrowth tangling like conspirators' whispers. Bess, the hound, bayed triumphantly as they approached a dense cluster of brambles and ferns, her paws scrabbling at a mound of freshly disturbed soil concealed beneath a fallen log. Reed pulled her back, and Craddock knelt, his gloved hands carefully parting the brush. What emerged from the shallow grave sent a collective gasp through the group. There, half buried in the loamy earth, lay the body of Reginald Fairfax, his once suave features contorted in a final grimace of surprise and pain. He was clad only in undergarments, his skin pallid and marred by livid bruises, the fatal wound a savage gash at the back of his skull, crusted with dried blood that had seeped into the soil like an accusing stain. No clothes, no possessions, just the stark evidence of violence interrupted. "My God," Fletcher murmured, crossing himself. "Murder, plain as day." Craddock stood, his jaw set. "Indeed, blunt force, spade perhaps, time of death. Rigor suggests overnight, but the doctor will confirm. Seal the area, Fletcher. No one in or out." Word spread like wildfire back to the manor, servants clustering in hushed knots as the news reached the breakfast room. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, midway through her coffee, set the cup down with a clatter that shattered the porcelain saucer. "Dead? In our woods? This is monstrous!" Clara Beaumont buried her face in her hands, a sob escaping. Poor Reginald! Who could do such a thing? Captain Langford, ever the stoic, placed a comforting arm around her. "Steady, darling. The inspector's on it. But this changes everything. No staged vanishing now." Mrs. Lydia Voss, her usual vivacity subdued, fingered her locket nervously. "That wound, brutal, a crime of passion surely, or desperation." Miss Jane Marple, who had joined the table quietly, her knitting untouched for once, observed the reactions with her customary acuity. The shock was genuine, she noted, Clara's tears, Langford's protective stance, Voss's pallor, but beneath, threads of relief perhaps or calculation. "A tragic turn," she said softly, "yet it illuminates." The body hidden separately, why? To mislead, or because the killer lacked time? Lady Evelyn turned to her. "Jane, your calm is enviable, but Thorn, he must be the culprit. Digging at night, that spade." Craddock re-entered, mud on his boots, his expression grim. "Ladies, gentlemen, Fairfax is dead, murdered. We've moved the body to the outbuilding for examination. Doctors en route, Thorn's being questioned anew." The room erupted in questions, but Craddock raised a hand, one at a time. "First, any ear disturbances in the woods last night? After Alice's alarm?" Heads shook. Alice, summoned from the kitchen, wrung her hands. "I saw the digging, sir, in the wood's edge, but too dark to see who. Shadowy figure, same as before." Craddock nodded. "Consistent. Now the body, stripped, clothes missing, matches your bundle, girl." Alice nodded vigorously. "Aye, sir. Rolled tight, stained dark." The inspector turned to the group. "Anyone notice blood on Thorn? Or unusual behaviour?" Perkins, hovering nearby, cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, Mr. Thorne returned to his cottage late that first night. His wife mentioned mud on his boots, but that's common. Miss Marple interposed gently. Inspector, the wound suggests a heavy implement. Garden tool? Precisely. We're testing the spade from the shed. As the doctor arrived, a local practitioner named Dr. Haywood, bespectacled and brisk, he confirmed death by blunt trauma, approximately 36 hours prior, around midnight of the disappearance. Struck from behind, he added. No defensive wounds. Surprise attack. Craddock mulled this. Ambushed. Perhaps lured out. Back in the scullery cell, Thorne faced the news with a stoic grunt. Not me, Inspector. I quarrelled with him. Over his trampling and his city ways. But kill? No. Then explain the nocturnal digs, Craddock pressed. Thorne sighed, his shoulders slumping. All right, not rats. It was a poached deer. Shot it in the woods day before. For the pot, time's hard. Buried the offal in the compost to hide. Dug it up later when suspicions rose. Moved it deeper. Didn't want the gamekeeper sniffing. Fletcher scoffed. Poaching? On Lady Hargrove's land. Aye, shameful, but true. Wife knows. Ask her. Craddock dispatched Fletcher to verify. Meanwhile, Miss Marple wandered to the outbuilding, where the body lay under a sheet. With permission, she peeked, noting the wound's shape, concave like a spade's edge. Impulsive, she murmured, not planned. Joining Craddock in the garden, she pointed to the compost heap. Blood meal sacks. Empty ones could wrap clothes. Stains mimic fertilizer. Craddock's eyes lit. Clever! If Thorne stripped the body to hide identity, buried garb in compost, heat destroys evidence. But Thorne's wife confirmed the poaching tale. Deer carcass in their larder. He buried the guts, yes. Panicked when police came. Released tentatively, Thorne glowered. See? Innocent? Yet doubt lingered. Afternoon brought lab results. Fibers from heap matched Fairfax's suit. Blood, too, human, type matching the deceased. Confronted, Thorne paled. Framed. Someone used my heap. Miss Marple, in the library with a group, listened as theories flew. Langford, Slade, the lender, tracked him, struck, planted evidence on Thorne. Voss, or a rival. That letter. Perhaps a mistress, luring him. Clara. But the quarrel. I heard Reginald and Thorne arguing loud that evening, by the arbour. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Arguments escalate. Like in my village, a farmer bashed over boundary disputes. Evening tea was tense, rain resuming. Alice confided in Miss Marple. The bundle, grunts when buried. Heavy, but not body-heavy. Clothes, Miss Marple nodded. Bloodied. Craddock revealed footprints in woods matched Thorne's boots. Arrest renewed. Thorne protested. I walked there, checking fences. Miss Marple pondered. Stage disappearance gone awry. Fairfax plans flight. Quarrels with Thorne, killed. Gardner panics, strips, buries clothes, hides body. But why woods? Time constraint. Night fell, Miss Marple sleepless, reviewing, button from coat. Thorne's? No, Fairfax's. Dawn's light brought clarity. Threads unravelling toward truth. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Elmwood Manor, filtering through the tall windows of the drawing-room, in shafts that illuminated motes of dust dancing like tiny spectres in the still air. The room, with its heavy velvet drapes and polished mahogany furniture, had always exuded an air of timeless dignity, but today it felt charged with an electric anticipation, as if the very walls held their breath, awaiting the unravelling of the tangled web that had ensnared them all. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, had summoned the household at Miss Marple's quiet insistence, her voice carrying through the corridors with the authority of one who brooked no delay. "We gather at 4, she had announced, to lay this ghastly affair to rest." The guests assembled with varying degrees of reluctance and curiosity. Clara Beaumont entered first, her arm linked with Captain Arthur Langford's, her face a delicate mask of composure, cracked by the faint tremor in her step. She wore a simple tea-gown of soft blue, but the colour did little to warm the chill that had settled in her eyes since the body's discovery. Langford, his moustache impeccably groomed, guided her to a settee with the protective air of a sentinel, his own expression a blend of bluff assurance and underlying unease. "Chin up, old girl," he murmured. "Whatever comes, we've weathered worse." Mrs. Lydia Voss followed, her entrance a rustle of silk and a faint chime of bracelets, her society poise intact, though her fingers clutched her handbag a touch too tightly. She chose an armchair by the fire, arranging her skirts with deliberate care, her sharp gaze darting about as if appraising the room for hidden dramas. "Well," she said, her voice laced with forced brightness, "if we're to have a denouement, let's hope it's swift. This suspense is murder on the nerves. Pardon the pun." Lady Evelyn herself took the central position by the mantel, her silver hair catching the light like a crown, her posture unyielding despite the shadows of fatigue under her eyes. Perkins, the butler, hovered discreetly at the door, ready to summon the staff if needed, while Alice Turner lingered in the background, her maid's uniform starched but her hands twisting nervously in her apron. Elias Thorne, released under watch but still under a cloud of suspicion, stood awkwardly by the window, his gardener's frame ill at ease in the refined setting, his eyes fixed on the gardens beyond as if longing for escape. Inspector Derek Craddock arrived last, accompanied by Sergeant Fletcher, who carried a notebook like a talisman. Craddock's moustache twitched with professional skepticism, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes as he nodded to Miss Jane Marple. The elderly spinster from St. Mary Mead sat modestly in a corner armchair, her knitting bag at her feet, needles idle for once as she surveyed the assembly with her bright bird-like gaze. She wore her habitual tweed suit, sensible and unadorned, yet in this moment she commanded the room's attention without a word. "Thank you all for coming," Lady Evelyn began, her tone measured. "Miss Marple has requested this gathering. She believes she has pieced together the puzzle of poor Reginald's fate. Jane?" Miss Marple inclined her head graciously, her voice soft but carrying with the clarity of long-honed insight. "Thank you, Evelyn. I am no professional, like our good inspector here, merely an old woman who has observed much of human nature in my quiet village. But patterns repeat, you see, greed, jealousy, impulse. They weave the same tapestries, whether in St. Mary Mead or here in Devon." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, drawing them in like a storyteller captivating her audience. Clara leaned forward, breath held. Langford's pipe remained unlit in his hand. Voss's fan stilled. Even Thorne shifted, his gaze turning inward. "Let us begin at the beginning," Miss Marple continued. "Mr. Reginald Fairfax arrived at Elmwood Manor as a guest, charming and urbane, but beneath that veneer lurked desperation. From London inquiries, we know his firm teetered on ruin, debts mounting, embezzlement whispers. He planned escape, a staged disappearance to evade creditors and start anew, perhaps in South America, as his bedside reading suggested. Buenos Aires, with its promise of anonymity for a man with portable assets. Craddock nodded. The telegram confirmed urgency. His partner Harris panicked. Precisely, Miss Marple agreed. Fairfax packed lightly, his suitcase gone, but evening clothes left to suggest haste or foul play. He intended to slip away that night, under moonlight, perhaps by foot to the village station, catching a late train. But fate intervened. She turned her gaze to Alice, who flushed under the attention. Young Alice, from her attic vantage, saw the burial, not of a body, but of something crucial. A bundle, long and narrow, stained dark. Clothes bloodied from a fatal quarrel. Gasps rippled. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Bloodied? Then murder from the start. Miss Marple held up a hand. Patience, my dear. Fairfax's plan unravelled in the garden. He wandered there, post-dinner perhaps to bury a decoy or scout his exit path. But he encountered Mr. Thorne. Thorne stiffened, his fists clenching. I told you, words only. He trampled my delphiniums again, laughed when I challenged him. City arrogance. More than that, Miss Marple said gently, but with steel beneath. You overheard him earlier, as your wife confided to me. Bragging on his telephone about swindles, ruining folk like you, who lost savings to such schemes years ago. It festered, didn't it? Then, in the moonlight, tempers ignited. A shove, perhaps, words escalating to blows. You grabbed your spade, always at hand for late tasks, and struck in rage. Thorne's face drained of colour. No, it wasn't planned. The room tensed. Craddock leaned forward. Confession? Miss Marple continued, her narrative weaving inexorably. Impulsive, yes, Fairfax fell. Head bashed, panic set in. You stripped him to delay identification or hide blood on his suit. Bundled the clothes stained crimson and buried them hastily near the arbour, where Alice glimpsed you. But the body, too heavy, too risky to bury there. You dragged it to the woods, concealed under brush, planning later disposal. Voss interjected, her voice sharp. But the compost heap, fibres found there. Ah, Miss Marple smiled faintly. Clever misdirection. You first hid the bundle in the compost. Warm, decomposing, to erase evidence. But when police dug the arbour and found nothing, you feared scrutiny. So, the second night you retrieved it, reburied deeper in the heap. Alice's second sighting? You, moving it again when rumours swirled. Thorne slumped. The heat would break down the blood, but that girl, always watching. Clara whispered, why not confess? Or flee? Fear, Miss Marple explained. Human nature clings to hope. You invented the poaching tale, plausible, with the deer in your larder. But footprints in the woods betrayed you. Your boots, unique tread from village cobbler. And the blood meal sacks, used to wrap the bundle, their stains mimicking fertilizer, but lab tests revealed human blood. Langford puffed his pipe finally. Devilish, but the letter pink perfumed. Lure? A red herring, Miss Marple said. Fairfax planted it himself, unopened, to suggest intrigue. A jilted lover, perhaps, drawing suspicion elsewhere. But the script? Cheap paper, likely forged by him to bolster his vanishing act. No E existed. A phantom. Lady Evelyn sighed. Reginald, ever the schemer, but to die over flowers? Not flowers, Miss Marple corrected. Pride, loss, Thorne's rage rooted in deeper soil. Financial ruin echoing Fairfax's own. Irony, isn't it? Victim and killer, mirrored in desperation. Craddock stood. Evidence mounts, Thorne. The spade, your prints, blood traces. Confess, man. Thorn's shoulders heaved, a sob escaping. Aye, it happened as she says. He mocked me. Dirt under my nails, dirt in my pockets. Snapped. One blow, then horror. Hid it all, prayed. It'd pass as disappearance, but secret surface, like weeds. The room exhaled collectively. Fletcher noted the confession. Clara wept softly. Voss fanned herself. Langford nodded grimly. Miss Marple rose, packing her knitting. Human frailty, Inspector. Predictable as seasons. In my village, a similar quarrel over land ended fatally. We see it coming, yet fail to prevent. As Thorn was led away, the manor sighed into quiet. Lady Evelyn embraced Miss Marple. Jane, your eye, unerring. Merely observation, dear. Gardens teach patience, people predictability. Twilight fell, shadows lengthening. Miss Marple gazed at the garden, roses blooming anew, oblivious to buried sins. Life persisted, mysteries resolved, but echoes lingered in the midnight earth.